Hello researchers, I'm Gabriele Chiapparini, welcome to Small Photobook Cult. Today's book is Grace. Grace is Scott Offen's intimate, deeply psychological odyssey into his 43 years old partnership. Through the lens of really different kind of cameras, the aging of human form of his muse and collaborator Grace merges with the wild landscape, crafting a surreal and timeless visual narrative that define convention and invite the viewer into a secret world of transformation. So welcome to this new episode of Small Photobook Cult. Here with us, Scott Offen. Hello, Scott. I'm really glad to speak with you.
Thanks. I'm really glad to be here.
Tim Carpenter suggests this book, and I'm always super happy when I am able to record an episode with a suggested book from another photographer. It's a great link, and it's also
Tim
really
is
good.
a really great guy.
Yeah, it's also really good to be, on the list of Tim.
Yeah. He put me on the at Filter Photo in Chicago. He chose Grace as one of the books to put on the shelf. So I was really flattered.
I saw it, I think, in Instagram stories or something like that.
Yeah. It was great. It was Filter Photo in Chicago, if you can get there, it's just a great experience. It's just one of the good photo things to do.
It's a bit far away from here, but I'm planning to go one day also because one of my favorite bands is from Chicago, that is Wilco. So I really have to visit the city.
Yeah, for sure.
It's gonna happen one day. I don't know when. So we can start speaking about the project. And the first question is, what brought this project about?
So I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory, which is I had never taken a photograph ever until 2014. And I was going through sort of the normal, I would say, middle age revisiting of life. And I thought I would just start photographing and, see what life really was like outside my head. And I started with street photography, and I photographed people for about 5 or 6 years, some of whom I'm still in contact with. So it was a really great experience. And even then, it was really important for me to show people the humanity and dignity of people. I think sometimes street photography turns into kind of rough kind of humor. And I wanted to do something that was quite different. So I took those photographs, and in 2017, I applied to Mass College of Art, and I was accepted. And I actually retired from my job to go back to school and to learn about photography and art. And then what happened was, in my second year, one of my professors was looking at my body of street photography. I hadn't started this project yet. And she said, "You've created a family of choice. Why don't you try looking at your family of origin?" And she suggested that I look at a bunch of family photographers like Emmett Gowan, of course, and Harry Callahan, of course, and others like Lee Friedlander. I looked at a photographer, Seiichi Furuya, who's a Japanese photographer that photographed in East Germany, and a bunch of other people, and thought this would be really a fun thing to do. The only problem was that nobody in my family wanted to be photographed except for Grace. So this started out as a project of Grace by default, because I got really excited looking at the photographs that I had seen. I think, honestly, you can see influences here and there. I don't think I photographed like any of those, any other photographer. But yeah, we started a collaborative effort that ran for 7 years. What I could say about the book is that the first thing and the most thing important to remember is that this is a completely collaborative body of work. It's a 7-year project in the context of a 41-year partnership, which meant there was already a lot of intimacy and trust between us, absolute trust. So it wasn't a situation where we had to earn trust like in some other kinds of photography. This trust really allowed us to create a body of work that was really a partnership. By that, I mean two things. We both had input on the project, equally. But in terms of taking the photographs, there was sort of a duopoly. Sometimes one of us would be more in charge of the photograph, and that, they would be the captain of the ship and the other person would be the first mate. And then other times we did everything together. We chose a location, the clothes, the time of day, really everything together, so that there's a bunch of photographs that you can't really tell who the author is. And then there's some where there's someone that's more of an author than the other. The only caveat to that is I was using the camera, and that required that I frame the shots and do a bunch of technical things. And so there's that little aspect to it. Grace was not interested in those things at all. And really, she was interested in the moment of the photograph. And then when we were sequencing the photographs afterwards, she was really interested in a big part of sequencing. It was that little gap that I got to operate a little bit more. But it was really, I can't emphasize enough how much of a collaborative or partnership this was. And that really, in our case, it was made possible by a long-standing relationship that was actually a long-standing friendship.
Can you imagine this project to exist earlier? Or do you think the 40 years of relationship really, really build this project too?
Well, I think absolutely 40 years of experience is a lot of experience, and traveling through a lot of adversity together, one of which is having children. And I don't mean to put down people who have children. We have 3 children. But we learned a lot. We learned to rely a lot on each other. We had, 3 kids in diapers at one point. And, you have to learn to rely on the other person. You have to learn to step up, to make that work. So I think really we went through so many things together in 40 years. I don't think our parents were particularly happy that we got married to each other. So from the very beginning, we were sort of a team of our own. And again, it builds a kind of trust. Those experiences that you pass through, it either doesn't work or it does work. And of course, it's up and down. And you learn to live through the down parts as well as the up parts. And I think that's learning to live through the down parts is sort of what helped us negotiate differences when we were making photographs. So I think it could only have been made at this time. It was also made when our kids were grown or in high school, and they didn't really need us so much, so we could go on out and do our own thing.
And you said that you looked at a lot of different family projects before starting this one. And I want to ask you, what kind of family portrait is this one? Because it's really different from, the typical kind of family portrait that you can imagine.
Yeah, it's not like vernacular, photography where people are taking pictures at parties or the beach or something. And it's really not like some of the other photographs or photographers that I talked about, who are all wonderful photographers, better photographers than I am, and I mean no criticism. But I think, a lot of those mid-century artists, there was a sense of the man taking a photograph of the woman. And I don't think there's any sense of that in this body of work. It actually doesn't exist, so it couldn't be in this body of work. Another difference is, I think mid-century photography, there were no photo books. Right? People would make collections of books and publish them, but there was no thematic continuity between the books, between the photographs. And so this is a book that is designed to be a continuous narrative throughout the entire book. And I think that's one of the things that makes it different from a lot of other books where this is a story about a particular person, going through, really taking stock of life. Trying to figure out, what does it mean to be an older woman, right? What does it mean to be invisible? That's a complaint that lots of older women have, that they become invisible. What does it mean to have been in a long-term relationship? What does it mean to be free of men? There are no men in this book at all, and that's by design. It's, I think, a feminist book, at least how we conceive of it, where you have a character who's very free in the world, and very comfortable in the world. The world is sort of this fairy tale place, and like all good fairy tales, some parts are funny and some parts are a little scary and some parts are just mysterious. but it's not the natural world that we live in, even though it's shot in the natural world, and draws on Grace's great love of New England and the local landscape here. Those are elements that go into the book. It's impossible to look at any one photograph and make a correspondence with any one idea. That's the other thing that I think is very different about this book. The book as a whole talks to these things, but there's no one photograph that sort of tells a story or even tells part of the story. And that was hard to achieve. It took 7 years of not only making the photographs, but figuring out how the photographs work. It doesn't look like, again, I'm not casting any aspersion on any other photographer. Many photographers have made wonderful books about family. But, this started as a family book, but my kids wouldn't participate. It ended up being a book about Grace, and it ended up being a book about what Grace was going through, as an aging woman, and not really about family at all. It's very centered on her as a character or persona of looking back, revisiting some of the fundamentals on which her life was based. It's different to be older. It's a difficult thing to think about changes in your life. It's a difficult thing to, express your kind of feminism in the world where there are a lot of contentious definitions of feminism. The other things to think about the book are the landscape, right? The landscape is foregrounded and is as much a character as Grace. And as I said, it's kind of a fairy tale landscape, sort of think the Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland. There are funny elements in it. There's silly elements in it. Grace is having fun in it, but sometimes there's scary elements. And Grace plays a diversity of roles within this book. Sometimes she's a person. Often she's very small in the frame, and there's more of the landscape or environmental portraiture than it might seem. And she's clearly having fun. She's not always happy. There are lots of photographs that are mysterious. There are lots of photographs where there's some photographs where she clearly doesn't look happy. And interestingly, one of the places that she doesn't look as happy as you might think is in the interior photographs. So the photograph was shot originally, and the sequence was in the interior. You can stop right here. I want to talk about the photograph on the right.
Yeah.
In the interior, and then she's moving to the exterior, which is an environment in which she's more free. She's in one of the photographs, she's a Nordic goddess. And another photograph, she's a sylph in the woods. She gets to choose what roles she plays. If you look at the photograph on the right, which is, I think, many people think is a beautiful photograph, look at her expression, right? She's not particularly happy. This photograph took a long time to make. It took 6 or 7 takes. Again, there's 2 sources of light. So we had to get the light coordinated. But she's not unhappy. She's just not particularly happy. She's functional. She's looking at her recipes for Thanksgiving, actually. And it's not, there's sort of domesticity and tranquility and lots of other nice things in the photograph. But she herself is not entirely happy about being in this place and doing this very domestic task. And I think that's, if you look through the interior photographs, you'll see that repeatedly. And that's not something that I told her to do or that she agreed to do. That's just something that came out of the environment. You have to say the photograph on the right is a little Harry Callahan. I wear that with a badge of pride since I love Harry Callahan's work. But it's also matched with what's on the left, which is a shadow. How entirely happy are you to be represented as a shadow or be represented with your face not looking at the viewer? I mean, it's aesthetically beautiful. I'm not sure what it means. I'm not sure what a lot of these photographs mean, frankly, which is really weird because we worked very hard on each photograph. very hard. We're both perfectionistic, and we used a wide variety of cameras to make this book. We used 8 by 10, 5 by 7, 4 by 5, Mamiya 7, which is a medium format camera, and 3 digital cameras. A lot of it depended on how quickly the photograph needed to be made. But I think this is a wonderful photograph. And it also, both of these photographs highlight a very important aesthetic element of the book, which is patterning. The book is full of matching and contrasting patterns. Really, it partly comes out of my love of Matisse. It partly comes out of West African portrait photography. And I think it's also a way of defining shape in the image so that you really get a sense of the physicality of the element in front of you. One of the things we're talking about Grace not looking at the camera, we don't see Grace's face for the first third of the book.
Yeah.
You don't see her face at all. And, that we're showing her independence, her resilience, her lack of, she has no need for company. Grace, in fact, has very little need for company. She's a very individual person. And she's perfectly happy going off by herself. And I think that's also reflected in the book is her comfort with herself. This is a photograph I think is very funny. It's a rock that grew up pretty high in a tree. And people are always saying, oh, it's a brain. No, it's a heart. I think it's just a funny, mysterious thing. Like, it doesn't have to be a brain or a heart. It just seemed to be part of this mysterious landscape. A rock that's in a tree 6 feet off the ground.
Yeah, it is. But I want to ask you about the Grace's face that we are able to see just here for the first time.
Right.
Why do you think this one was why you or the publishing house that designed with you together the book, why you altogether thought that this one was the right moment to show her face, and also why this picture?
Okay. So the way the picture happened was we were walking in a forest in the winter. There was not a lot of snow, and there was a hollow log. So really, as a joke, I said to Grace, why don't you get on the other end of the hollow log and I'll take your photograph? And we did. But she kept looking at the camera because that's the natural angle of her eyes. And I didn't want her to look at the camera. I wanted it to be more ambiguous than that. So I asked her to raise her eyes as high as she could, raise her pupil as high as she could. That's actually a really hard thing to do and almost painful, and certainly was uncomfortable for the number of times that she did it. And I think we created, there's humor in the book. I'm not sure about this photograph, but we wanted to create a sort of Alice in Wonderland or Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz kind of image. And, sometimes Dorothy is small, and sometimes Alice is small, and sometimes she's very tall. And I think that captured that possibility of largeness. And I think it's a pretty striking photograph. I think that's why it was chosen to be in this location. I think it used to be a photograph that was the favorite photograph before other people looked at other photographs. And it's a pretty striking image and a pretty ambiguous image. She's looking at something, but we don't know what she's looking at. And I think that's a big part of the book, which is her interiority is not accessible to us.
Mm-hmm. Also because we arrive from a lot of pictures where we look at Grace in a bit maybe a voyeuristic point of view, and in the end, when she finally when we are able to see her face, she don't consider us at all. She's still inside her world, and also if we have this really close up of the face, she don't care about us.
Right.
And I
That's
think
absolutely right.
Especially passing from all these pictures that are quite far, quite open, and there is a lot of landscapes, and then you arrive here, and it's really powerful, the fact that still she didn't notice us.
Yeah, I think we noticed that a lot of the photographs were shot at a medium or far distance, and we wanted to get a portrait in there, but we didn't want to have a standard portrait because that would have sort of violated the ethic of the book. I just love this photograph. I mean, I remember every detail of making it. I mean, there's dirt on Grace's chin, and there's the tree, the hollow logs all around her. So it's slightly out of focus, which brings a lot of focus on her face. And the beauty of it is that a lot of our photographs were, all of our photographs are set up. No one sticks their head in a hollow log to have their photograph taken, right? It's set up. And so even though a lot of our photographs were set up, there's sort of two kinds of setups. Some is we're walking through the woods and we have an idea and we set up the photograph. You're going to stand here. I'm going to stand here. This is what we're going to do. Other photographs, in terms of being set up, were more like the pantry photograph, where we take 6 or 7 tries. I actually dreamt a number of those photographs, and couldn't wait to get up and make it work. So I think it's a nice mix that way. There's sort of I wouldn't say spontaneous, but there's sort of a more relaxed photographs, and then there are others that seem to be highly structured and have a different feel to them.
There is a lot of nature. Do you see like nature as a kind of mirror, a refugee, or something else in the book?
I think the landscape is a character of its own in the book. And I think it's, as a character, it complements what Grace is doing. I don't think it illustrates what Grace is doing. And these two photographs here are almost landscapes. You have a very tiny figure sort of making their way through this landscape. It's as much about the landscape as it is about the person. I don't think the landscape per se says this is what the person is doing or this is what the person feels, but we both have a great love of New England and New England landscapes and spend time outdoors. And we wanted to show that, but also it's sort of, often in these photographs where Grace is quite small, they're often quite funny. I mean, we didn't want the landscape to be overwhelming or ominous. We wanted it to be a complementary character. Yeah. And we wanted it to, another thing to think about this book is there's really not a lot of contemporary signifiers. And so that was also by design. We wanted to not distract the viewer with a lot of contemporary stuff. And I wouldn't say exactly make it timeless. I think that's a funny goal, because nothing is really timeless. But we wanted to remove the element of time as much as possible. And the way that time is expressed is through the landscape. So if you look at the photograph on the left, it's a swamp. It looks like it's filled with snow. It actually isn't. It's filled with a little tiny plant called duckweed. But I think it has a sort of slightly more ominous feeling. And it's paired with a really weird photograph that I myself don't understand. I can see that it works, but I think it's one of the stranger photographs in the book where Grace is walking behind a fence she's got to this fence post and sort of stopped, and it's not clear. It's clear that she's happy or she's not afraid in this odd environment, because the fence doesn't even go all the way across the picture. So she's comfortable, it looks like, but it's kind of, I would say it's one of the stranger photographs.
Yeah, there is something weird, of course. Also, she's choosing the direction in the left that is the one with the fence and not the one in the right that it's open. And it's looking like a bit stuck, against that wood thing in the fence. What conversation did you and Grace have about representing the passage of time in this project?
Well, we were both pretty committed to the idea that just because it's about an aging or older woman, it doesn't need to have a lot of time signatures, and that the passage of time could be represented by light in the landscape. There are a number of photographs, I don't know if you can see it, but where she's wearing a sort of really cheap black plastic watch. And we had that in there for a while to show that we weren't trying to make something timeless per se. We had a little bit of something contemporary in the photograph, but most of those didn't make the cut. So this is another photograph that was, the one on the left, that is really ambiguous to me. Is she a scarecrow? Is she a Christ-like figure? Is she embracing the world? Um, and we don't know what she's thinking because we can't see her face. And that just happens to be one of my favorite photographs. Larchieri, matched it with another really odd landscape where you have a windswept tree. You can see through to a mountain in the distance. It's not what you would expect from a New England landscape. It's something on its own that's a little bit strange. But I think at this point, we should also talk about the sequencing of the book. I don't know if I said this already. But I tried making a number of sequences of these books. So every time we started with a sequence that Grace and I would make together, and we would show it to people. I would show it in crit, because most of this was made, some of it was made during the time I was at Mass Art. Some professors helped me make it. A gallery owner helped me on the sequence. Actually, another book publisher helped me with the sequence. But in the end, it was sequenced by Teresa Piardi at Larchieri, and she did an amazing job. I think she really brought out all of the things that we were talking about in a way that I just wouldn't have expected. Like if you go back to the first image, which is the image of that carving in a tree, like that's a completely strange thing to me. The story behind that is in the Boston Public Garden, there's a big pond called the Duck Pond. It's about a meter deep, and it's full of ducks, and it's full of swans, and it's full of boats that drive people around, paddle boats. And you normally can't get to this place called Duck Island, but had drained it to clean up the bottom of the pond. It's not a natural pond, it's a concrete bottom, and they were cleaning it up. And you could walk out to Duck Island. And when I walked out to this little teeny tiny island, I found this really strange symbol. I have no idea what it means. It's not even square. It's a strange parallelogram. But, Teresa put it first. And I think it's just a great signifier for a book that is not simple and not about simple explanations. And it has that sort of Alice in Wonderland sense of fun about it, as well as a sense of mystery. And I think it was really set the tone for the book in a way that we'd never been able to sequence.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a great picture for start this project, because as you said, there is a symbol here, but we are not able to encrypt it. Like we can just watch it, and probably each one is going to have different thoughts. Another thing that I thought watching this one is that you have the other two main characters of the book, except Grace, of course, that it's nature and the house, the four walls that are, the place where the other picture are set. And it's beautiful, the fact that if this is the house, it's a weird house, like it's not really comfortable. The shape is weird. It's not
square.
No, not at all.
I mean, most houses are squares or rectangles, and this is a kind of a parallelogram. And I think as a representation of the house, I think that it does set the mood for a kind of ambiguous relationship that Grace has with domesticity.
Yeah, exactly. Scott, because we are speaking about this topic, we spoke about the first picture, but I want to ask you also why the last one. That it's also like really in the end of the book, after the colophon, and then we have this.
Yeah. So the swing is a really funny story. During the COVID lockdown, my kids and I used to walk for... Oh, you're talking about this one?
Yeah, this one.
This one. I didn't put it there. I ended the sequence with the swing.
So which one? This one?
Yeah, I ended with that one.
So, yeah. And were you speaking about this one before?
Yeah,
about
I was speaking
the COVID
about this.
And the walking.
Yeah. So my boys and I were walking 7 or 8 miles a day. We had nothing to do. And we stumbled upon a tiny copse of trees next to a school. I mean, it was a very small area, and in it was this swing. So I said to Grace, you have to swing on this swing because there's no photograph in which you express, extreme joy. And we associate swinging, with joy. It's how you bring in the monsoon. In South Asia, it's swinging is a fun activity that kids do. And so Grace had not been swinging for many, many years. And I had to coach her on how to swing because she couldn't really, I had to push her and I had to coach her on how to pump her legs. And then in the middle of taking this photograph, which was supposed to be a joyous photograph, the swing started to fall down. And so Grace has this weirdly weird look on her face, which is not at all the smiling photograph that I expected, but it's actually more in keeping with the ambiguity of the book. Um, she's doing a really fun activity, but we're not entirely sure how she feels about it. And I think it was really a fun photograph to take. The last photograph that's in the book is it just seemed to us to be a really beautiful photograph of a winter scene, but one that was sort of didn't really fit the mold, right? There's no big icy tree. There is an icy tree somewhere else. There's not very much snow, and you have this really beautiful tangle of bushes and little buds. And I think it was really beautiful, a great coda to a lot of the things that were in the book, a lot of the landscapes that are in the book. I think this is one of the happiest ones. I like the play between the buds and the snow and just the whole cacophony of the whole thing. There's no central element like a tree or a flat field of snow. It's just a big wild mess. I think is a very suitable way of reflecting on the book, right? The book has no central element. It has maybe central feelings that come through, but there's no visual element that I think is central. The elements of the book are built up through the photographs, some of which are clearly more interesting than others, but it's the totality of the photographs that make the book. There's no one big standout sunrise or.
If the first one set you in a specific mood, what we said before, this one, like to me, it's a bit like after spending quite some time with you two, like you and Grace, and see all these weird things happening. Then this is the end, the last of the book. You have these beautiful things that at the same time it's also a kind of wall, like you are outside your world, your bubble as a viewer. I think it's a privilege to watch book and project like this because you are going inside a kind of intimacy from between two people, but in the end you are someone from outside the relationship. So again, at the end of the book, you are kind of rejected by the book. I don't know if it have any sense.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, it's a tangle that you can't penetrate. And it has that ambiguity of the snow in the sort of cupped in the seeds where the flower used to be. And I mean, ironically, I also think it's one of the happier photographs in the book.
It is. It's really a gentle way, to push you back. And also, I like the aspect of voyeurism again a bit. You can look through this tree, but like you don't see nothing. You have in the end you have this tree that is blocking you completely. There is no way to go inside this place. And for me, this place is the book, like all the rest that you saw before.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of questions, Scott. First of all, let's start from an easy one. Why the black and white?
Well, my first project was in color. And then when I went to school, we had a year of film, which is pretty unusual in education now. People usually do one semester, they just start with digital. And since we were processing our own film, color processing is sort of a problematic right now. We were processing in black and white. And I came to love it. Like I came to think of it as like, scholarly ink paintings in Asia. I think it's just really beautiful, and I think it has an important element, which is I think color can attract you to the surface, where I think black and white really models the structure the things in the photograph. And once I started shooting black and white, I just never wanted to shoot anything else. I'm not shooting it for nostalgic reasons, for sure, but I think it just models the figure really well, and there's no distraction from color. I mean, when you have color, you see the color. You don't necessarily see the form of the body or the form of the rock that's in front of you. So that was a conscious choice, and I'm still photographing in black and white. And I think it was a good choice. Well, I was going to say, we used a lot of film photography in this project. There's 8x10, I said 5x7, 4x5, and medium format. And a lot of that is traditionally associated with black and white photography, not always, but just the format and the process, seemed to fit really well together. And I think black and white was sort of a suitable signifier of the subject and the process. I mean, I really love my large format cameras. It's like a mystical experience for me when I'm under the dark cloth and I have all this crazy stuff I can do. I can do swings and tilts and rises and falls, and I can really take what's in front of me on the ground glass and make it into something quite different, so that the photograph isn't an entirely faithful representation of what's in the little square. It can be, you can create distortion with it as well. So you can use a lot of the movements to create a kind of resolution and detail that the human eye can't see, right? So it's really great for that. But you can also create distortion with those same techniques and make the photograph its own thing. Like, I believe the photograph can't be a representation of what's in front of it because, if you're photographing a rock, well, there's all kinds of radiation bouncing off that rock that you can't see, and there's detail in the surface of the rock that you can't see, and there's structure in the middle of the rock that you can't see. So you can't make a faithful representation of even something as simple as a rock. So the goal always was to make the best photograph with the tools that we had at hand. That doesn't mean that they're non-representational. It means that the photograph is its own thing that, commands its own respect. Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I use black and white, because it fits in with the process, and it also models what's in the frame in a way that you can't model it with color.
How was Scott working with so many different cameras? Because is it not all with large format?
I mean, there are little quirks between as you move from 8x10 down to 4x5. So, but it's not that different. It's really not that different. And a lot of people shoot more than one of those formats. Medium format, of course, is really different because you have a rangefinder, and it does change how you photograph as a result. And I really like that. I like that challenge. There's a parallax problem, and you're trying to figure out what you're actually photographing. And I think it's just a lovely, lovely 120 is just a lovely film to use. It gives you a really big negative that you can blow up to an enormous size, and it's handheld, unlike the other cameras I was using. In terms of the digital cameras, I got an 850, a Nikon D850 DSLR. It's sort of the last great DSLR made, and I paired it with two Sigma lenses, a 40 millimeter and a 135 millimeter, and it makes unbelievable photographs, just really beautiful, beautiful photographs. And then I used a Nikon Z7, which was really a mistake. I should have gone to a Sony, but I didn't want to relearn all of the tabs that you had to go through. And then I got a Sony GFX 100S to see how close I could come to the feeling of large format with it. And you can't really, but it makes a very large image that gives you a lot of detail that sort of, if you kind of close your eyes a little bit, looks like a large format image.
Yeah, I agree.
So a lot of it, if you go back to the photograph of there's Grace in a diamond sweater.
Which one?
She's in like a checkered sweater lying on the ground. This one, go back one, this one.
Ah, yeah.
So like this, I could not have made this with a film camera, right? Grace was lying on rocks, it turned out, and was pretty uncomfortable and didn't want to stay there very long. And I had to use a digital camera. First of all, I had to stand on top of this pile of rocks looking down, so I couldn't use a tripod, and I didn't want to bother with thinking about the consequences of medium format. So I've never shot 35 millimeters, so I just shot, a digital camera and was able to make a bunch of exposures. What was really important to me was getting the Grace's face right. This is a photograph where I was the captain and Grace was the first mate, frankly. And I wanted to get the right expression on her face, and I could only do it with a digital camera, or I could take a bunch of shots and pick between two or three.
And how was then to have all these pictures that you took with really different cameras and put it together in the same project?
So I was really lucky. I went to Acorn Editions, and there are two people there that are sort of world famous among people who know. And one is Mark Elliott, and the other is Paula Bosworth. Mark he photographs mostly film, but he looked at all of these exposures and he said they're all in different tones. Some are a little more green, some are a little purple. Even though they were all printed out in Photoshop together, but it wasn't really perfect. So he went through each one. And he said, you love film, so this should look filmic.
Yeah.
And so he took one of his own large format images and he said, we're going to match it to this. And he did it. We did an incredible job. Paula is an amazing printer, and I went every week. We marked up photographs. It was a 4-month process between the three of us, and occasionally my professor, Laura McPhee, would show up and then change everything. It was quite amusing. We'd done all this work, and she was like, too much contrast. But it took a long time to get them to share the same tonal values and have that filmic look, which is what I was most happy about.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to understand which one is digital and which one is a film.
It's hard. I mean, I have put these, under glass on the wall for gallery shows. Well-known photographers had tried to guess and got it wrong. The advantage is it gave the book a great deal of uniformity, which I think helped the book articulate the intentions that Grace and I had about it. And I have to say, working with Lartiere to make, the book prints was also a very long experience. At one point, Gianluca said to me, if we don't finish, we won't have anything to show at APAD. And that's how long it was taken. So, it took a while to pick, Garda Ultramet as the paper, and it took even longer to get the prints right. I mean, and the hard part, of course, is, they're in Bologna, so, FedEx doesn't mean overnight. FedEx means you'll see it in 3 days. And then, I would look at it for a couple of days and then ask some friends and then make some notes. And we would have a Zoom, and then I would send it back to them marked up, and then they would send another effort to me. So this was an incredibly inefficient way of working in detail, but, their commitment to getting it right was really, really incredible. I may have said it earlier that it's often said that the book is its own thing. You're going to be disappointed. It won't look like the prints. They'll be cousins of the prints. But I didn't have that experience at all. I mean, I would say these photographs are brothers or sisters of the prints. They're siblings. They're not far off at all. The biggest difference, I would say, is that the book has less contrast, and the prints have a little more contrast because it works better hanging on a wall.
It's a great goal to reach when it happened.
Yeah, I was prepared for, but I have to say the first set of proof prints that they sent me were so close. I was surprised. And it was just working, in great detail about what kind of varnish we wanted to use. And then of course the other, the details of the printing. And in many ways I prefer the book to the prints. That's how much I like them.
So a lot.
Yeah, I like them a lot.
Scott, I have still a few questions. How was the feeling coming from street photography to start this project that is really personal and intimate?
So when I did street photography, it actually directly comes out of my project of street photography. I photographed a small group of people, of indigent people who were living outside near where I worked. And the one thing I didn't want to do was sort of a relatively common, again, I'm not criticizing a particular photographer, but there's sort of a very common way of looking at poor people and photographing them in a way that I think is patronizing and condescending. So I had a whole bunch of rules. One is I wouldn't photograph anybody without consent. I wouldn't photograph anybody that I thought was impaired and couldn't give consent. And I photographed people, basically portraits of people, because I wanted to show that these people had the same dignity and the same worth as everybody else. And that was really important to me. I sound like I'm on a moral crusade or I'm on my high horse, but those were the things that went into that. And I learned working with those people, those subjects, that it really has to be collaborative. And if it's not collaborative, and I wanted it to be collaborative, I had to figure out ways to make it collaborative, to get people to cooperate and cooperate happily. And I'm still in contact with some of those people, 10 years later. And so that's what my professor was saying when she said, "You've created a family of choice," because I was working with a small group of people very intimately. I would spend all day with them. I mean, it's amazing that I didn't get fired. I retired to go to art school, but for 3 or 4 years, I just never showed up at work. I just took photographs. And sometimes I would take photographs right outside the office because that's where the people were. And as long as my job requirements were being met, nobody really cared. I mean, I was very lucky to work at the company that I worked at. And so I actually had the best year ever, the year that I retired. And I was offered a promotion. I walked into my boss's office to say, "I'm sorry, I have to retire." And he said, "Well, let me go first. We want to give you this big promotion." And I said, "I'm sorry. I'm here to retire to go to art school." And, he said, "Oh, fuck." And because now he had to find a new person. But I don't know if I'll ever publish that work,
Yeah.
I've thought about it. It's in color and it's 100% digital. But, it was an important part of how I developed as a photographer.
So
Learning
it was quite natural to step into this project in the end.
100%. It's just that I didn't know anything about photography at that point in time. Yeah, I was totally self-taught. I had taken a few night classes, but it was a really meaningful experience to me. I mean, I can get a little bit emotional about it. In the end, I had to leave that community, which was really painful for a whole bunch of reasons. The situation was, I had a weird kind of immunity because I was photographing so many different people or so many people. And then when I started concentrating on the smaller group of people, I felt really immune in very dangerous situations. And that actually changed. Many of the people that I had photographed were no longer there. And I did not feel as secure, in what was a pretty dangerous environment. So that was one of the reasons that I stopped. And then I showed this work at school. And the other reason that I stopped was I found something that was really, I wouldn't say more important to me, but something that I really wanted to say. And I really wanted to say with a person, one person, not with sort of a family of choice. I wanted to say it with one person. And, I'm just very lucky that that person had things that she wanted to say that we could capture together.
Yeah. So
This one here is really funny. Grace was wearing like a Nordic dress from somewhere in Scandinavia, and there were these sunflowers, and we were thinking, wouldn't it be funny if the warrior goddess's weapons were a bunch of sunflowers? And Grace is not a naturally angry person, so I had to coach her into making an angry face. I would go, grrr, and she would go, grrr. And it took a while. This was also a digital photograph. It took a lot of takes to get the angry face. I think being smiling and being angry are both hard to do on demand.
yeah, now to be honest, I'm a bit sad that Grace is not here with us for this episode.
Grace is really funny. She didn't go to APAD. She did come to APAD, but she only stayed for a day. She doesn't want to go to Paris. She didn't go to ICP. She didn't go to Filter Photo. She's a very private person. Really feels like she can't add anything to what the photographs say. But, she's, like anybody else, she's often quite hilarious and, sometimes, more introspective, which I think shows in the photographs. If you can find the photograph with Grace's legs sticking through the trees, I don't know where that is.
Let's try to find it. Probably it's more close to the end. Oh, too much.
That's where she's climbing a wall. This is one of the earliest photographs that I took of Grace, and I took in my first year in class. And again, there's a lot of patterning in it by design. I think it sort of sculpts her body the way the way the rocks are put together sculpt the rocks. And it was sort of a funny idea about her wanting to escape domesticity. And this was even before we had the idea of this project. This was one of the very first photographs. If you go to the next page, we'll keep going one more page, I think. Nope, another page. No, it's not there. There's a photograph of Grace looking out the window. Not that one. Nope, keep going. Okay, go back one. So this photograph was a really funny photograph. It's designed to be sort of an Alice in Wonderland kind of humorous photograph. It was not Grace's favorite photograph to make, but I think it has that sense of whimsy about the landscape and about Grace that you don't see always in the book. You get senses of this mystical landscape. Sadly, all those trees have been cut down. They were hundreds of years old. I don't know why. So this photograph can never be taken. And if you go forward the other way, there, stop. So these also were two photographs that I took of Grace in the first year of school. When we had no idea what this was going to be. I think they're both medium format photographs. And, they're really interesting. Grace is looking out the window. What does it mean? She's in a room that's full of patterns that clash with the shawl that she's wearing or the blanket that she's wearing. And this is before we knew what we were doing. And, the one on the right, Grace is showing us literally her most precious object, which is a tiny robin's egg in a tiny nest. And we keep it in that basket to be safe. But again, we don't see her face. We know she's looking at it. We don't know exactly what it means to her, but it must be precious because it's kept in a basket. And then you have this series of concentric circles. Oh, there she is. There's the ugly watch that I mentioned, designed to introduce a little contemporary in some of the photographs. So one of the interesting things is we took a lot of photographs before we knew what the photographs meant. So we didn't start out day one taking these photographs. We started out trying to take the most beautiful photographs we could make. And then over time, what they were really about sort of emerged on its own.
So is the project that from a certain point start to lead you or not?
Yeah, I would say that's true. I would say I'm going to get my copy of the book.
Okay.
So there are a bunch of photographs that start leading in that direction. One is the photograph of Grace waving between those trees. I find it it's near the beginning. And I find it's like the second or third photograph. Yeah. I find it really scary. I mean, to me, it reminds me of a black and white horror film. And to me, I mean, it really does. It's a scary photograph, I think. Other people don't read it that way, of course. But I think that's when I began to think about, and Grace as well, that this was a land. It wasn't just a person, but it was leading into a land that would be expressive or somehow relate to how she was feeling. And the next photograph was when I really realized that we were doing this project. The photograph is interesting. Again, it's as much patterning as we can cram into it because we like patterning and we think it's, the leaves are a pattern, but then the quilt really draws our eye attention and it's drawn in further by the patterned dress, and her feet are off the ground. Like she's so comfortable she doesn't need to have her feet on the blanket. This is when I really thought this is an expressive person who's not sharing all of her feelings with us through her face, and that it could be a really weird landscape. So this photograph is photographed in a shallow bowl of leaves. And as a result, there's no real perspective, right? There's perspective of starting at the corner, going to the dress, to the feet, right? But there's no sense of perspective outside of that because there is none. She's in a shallow shallow hole filled with leaves. And it's impossible to get any sense of larger direction from that photograph. So we have Grace in sort of a nowhere space, not showing us her face, but being perfectly comfortable in this environment. She's not wearing shoes. She's not bundled up. She's not looking over her shoulder. Could she just be sleeping or napping? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Her feet are comfortable in the leaves. So I thought this started to address, this was the real beginning of what we were trying to accomplish.
So this is the moment when you understand what you both were doing.
Yeah, for sure.
And after how much time?
Oh, this is a more recent photograph. This was after, 3 or 4 years.
No, quite a lot.
We just tried to make beautiful photographs, and we didn't have an idea of that they were visually linked. It's really dumb, but we had no idea that there was a visual link between them in terms of subject matter, but in terms of tone and style. And we just tried to make beautiful photographs. And then one day, a photograph like this came up and we were like, oh, wow, there's a lot going in this photograph. And is it going on in other photographs? And this photograph, by the way, like many of the photographs, had to be made several times to get it right. There's virtually no photograph in this book that was made, right away.
Yeah, in a single shot.
Right.
Yeah, it's always curious because when you speak also with, big photographers that you love, I don't know why you always imagine that they have a kind of superpower and each picture is just one shot. But I think it's almost never like this. Like you need to try and try. And something that really fascinating me is what do you need in a picture to be that pictures and why the other one that probably are quite similar are not the right one?
It's a great question. Part of it was the feet. I mean, we didn't want her sort of sleeping have her feet on the blanket because we thought it would look too much like Sleeping Beauty. We wanted to have a little bit of I wouldn't say jarring, but a little bit of a question in there. I have a friend who thinks that she looks dead and hates this photograph because the feet aren't on the blanket. But I think that's really crazy. And another thing was getting the angle right, because one of the things about this being a work about an older woman was, noticing Grace's gray hair and being sure that that was visible. And, she's wearing sort of an old-fashioned dress. Again, we're trying to avoid too much contemporary time. But yeah, I mean, she picked the dress, I picked the blanket, and we both found the leaves. I mean, it was just, that's how we work.
It's a pictures made by layers.
Right.
And Scott, I want to ask you, what do you hope this project can sparkle in the viewers?
I want them to, well, before we get there, can I show you some other pictures?
Of course, all the time that you
want. Okay. The picture of Grace and the rock, and then the picture of her under the leaves, I think are really worth talking about.
Is it this one?
This picture here, yeah. So I think I mentioned it earlier, but I want to mention it with the photograph in front, which is you can see there's a 2 meter tide from high tide to low tide. And it took us several years to make this photograph because we had to get the cycle of the tides in the right place as the cycle of the sun. And it just took a really long time. It's far away from our house, and we only went out, 2 or 3 times a year to try to make it. And it was hard to figure out what her body should be doing. And is it a Sisyphean photograph? She's pushing up a rock, or is she worshiping the rock? Like, I don't really know. I know that what matters is her intensity. To me, that's what matters, and the strangeness of it matters. This is an enormous glacial erratic that weighs tons, that was just left on a beach, and so that's one kind of highly intense worked on photograph. It took 5 years to make. But another photograph that I want to look at is the photograph of Grace under the big leaves. And this is an example of how we can structure or stage a photograph on the fly. So we were walking in a public garden, and Grace saw these enormous leaves, and she said, I want to be photographed under those leaves. So she got under the leaves. By the way, there were nettles there, so she was getting stung the whole time this photograph was being made. And she partly disrobed. And really, my only contribution to this photograph was to frame it and shoot it. So this photograph, it's a photograph. It's on the cover of the book. It's a photograph that many people seem to like very much. And it's the photograph which I had the least to do with. And that's the kind of partnership we have. Like, you wouldn't look at that and say, like, oh, Grace made that. But in fact, she did. And I think it's also rather sensitive to that it's a photograph about an older body. I mean, she doesn't look like a young woman. We think of young women with, nude or partly nude outside, as being of a very young age. And this is an older woman who's completely comfortable with her body and completely comfortable with the sort of little bit of fat on her back. Maybe fat's not a nice word, extra material. And it's just a great photograph. And again, it's a photograph where we don't see, it's one of these important photographs where we don't see Grace's face. We don't know why she's sitting there. We don't know anything about it except that she's perfectly comfortable in this Alice in Wonderland kind of landscape.
Is she sitting?
She's sitting, yeah.
I was imagining standing. I don't know why. And if you imagine her standing, it's also, I don't know, it's more weird because you start to think how tall are this stuff, this leaf. And
right. Well, it's good that you don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we see really few about all the pictures because we just see the leaves and a partial part of the body.
The point, one of the points was to give the reader as much space for interpretation as possible and to be didactic as least as we could. So I don't think there are any photographs that really tell you what to think.
No, not in this project at all.
No. Yeah, it's just sort of creating a world in which this older woman gets to think about and revisit things like femininity and domesticity and what the landscape really means to her and invisibility, right? I mean, she's there in the photograph. She's also invisible practically. And she was, certainly nobody paid attention to us, old people making a photograph. And I think it's about a lot of, I don't know how to put it exactly, but, Grace is solitary, right? She's free in her self-expression. She challenges the conventional norms of a patriarchal society because there are no men in the book. She does not need men. I mean, I like to think that she needs me, but she doesn't need men as a category.
Yeah, but I also like the fact that the leaves, their self shapes a bit the Grace body.
Yeah.
Because, for example, you don't see really the edge of the arm, and so it's the leaf a bit define the arms, and it's the leaf define also the head in some way, and the back, and you don't know if she's standing or sitting. Like there is a lot of connection between nature and the body. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say the contact between the body and the natural environment is frequent and thereby design. She's sort of a goddess of this little bit of landscape. She walks freely, she walks alone, she's unafraid, and very often the contours of her body, as you said, are determined by the environment around her. She's not separate from the environment. That's a lot of different ways than many people think, right? We go to a park, right? We go on a hike. We don't live in many people, certainly many people in this country or in this region of the country, don't really live in a natural environment. And, it's something that from Grace's childhood has been, really, really important to her. This is where she comes into her own. And that's not true. The kitchen, by the way, is not where she comes into her own. That's clear. But she likes to bring back trophies. I mean, it is in fact true that Grace likes to bring back trophies. So, we don't have to go back there, but the photograph of the bird's nest in the basket and this protective shield, she brought that back from nature to the home. It's one of the things that she loves to do. I'm sitting in front of a cabinet full of things that Grace found from the outside. Even simple things as like a weirdly dried chrysanthemum. And if you go to the picture of the dandelion fluff that's in her closet, there's a closet and it has some like clothes and some dandelion stuff in it. There, on the right. That's another sort of trophy that she's brought back into her domestic space. A whole bunch of dandelions. And it's a weird thing. It's sort of a signifier of her relationship with the outside. I'm not sure, but it's something that we know is really important to her. Bringing the outside in. I'm trying to think if there are other photographs that have that sense. I'm not other photo. Oh, so if you go to, there's a scary kind of oak tree, and then there's Grace. She's taped some pine cones to her ears.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you look at the oak on the left, it's broken and scary a little bit. I mean, but this was a really hard photograph to take, by the way. I had to put 3 movements on the camera to get everything sharp. But it's scary. It's not a happy oak tree. It's a dead oak tree. And yet, on the right, her sort of response to that is to become part of nature. She's taped a bunch of pine cones, to her ear. She's not really, I mean, it's sort of a funny joke about earrings, but it's also sort of a sign about, that she incorporates nature within her. And then there's a few pictures further in of her with these vines, and there, yeah. So that's a really interesting, comparison. The vines are almost like braids. She's becoming part of the environment that she finds herself in. And again, has a little whimsy in it. It has a little fairy tale in it because it is a fairy tale landscape. But it's an interesting pairing with the photograph on the left where, her feet are hot. She's hiked up her blanket. Her feet are actually in terrible shape if you look at them. And there's a lot of, wear that life brings to your feet. You're standing them all the time. And there's a little bit of beautiful lighting on the sole of her foot. But if you were to look at these and say, like, where is the place that Grace belongs the most? I mean, I would say it's the place on the right.
Can I ask you the question that I asked you before?
Yeah. What was the question?
What do you hope this project can sparkle in the viewers?
I want them to have a sense of awe. That's what I'd like to have them a sense of both awe and the variety of emotion that a book that doesn't have a plot line can lead them to. It's a narrative, but it's a nonlinear narrative, and it clearly doesn't seem to go anywhere in particular. Although the first shot and the last shot are quite meaningful in terms of bracketing it, that it's a world we can't enter. And so our only reaction to it is to be in awe of the landscape, and in awe of the person who lives in that landscape, who commands that landscape and can use that landscape to express, of the feelings that she's undergoing or the things that she's thinking about at her stage of life. So I think humor is important in the body of work. I think sometimes there's something approaching despair, but I think the idea that she can do this and do this on her own and be comfortable is awesome. And I think the landscape, these are mostly environmental portraits, so the landscape is everywhere. I think the landscape, this sort of mysterious, fantastical, and humorous landscape is something also that I think people should be in awe of. It's actually really hard to build a landscape like that. And I'm not saying they should be in awe of the process, but they should think about what that landscape is doing. Right? That landscape is a character. And I think that maybe it's about the limits, that you can enter into another person's world. You can admire it, you can understand parts of it, but fundamentally it's off limits. You can't get there. And I think that's, the other thing, of course, is I want people to look at the photographs and, think that they're beautiful. We worked really hard to make beautiful photographs, and I think we succeeded a lot of the time. And, I love beautiful things. We were talking earlier about, my desire to have a pilgrimage fresco, my desire to have a fresco pilgrimage in Italy. Beautiful things are really important to the both of us. And that was a large part of making the book. I don't know if that's an answer you were looking for, but...
Yeah, 100%. But I think it's something that you really see, understand from the first and the last picture. Like with that two pictures in that specific position, you really set this mood of the book. I feel that this work speaks a lot about the relationship between you two. Also, if you only can see the Grace side, there is also all your side that are taking pictures, and you are inside the pictures, so you have a kind of deep reading on what is happening, and the viewer is just an outsider of this world.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I think it goes back in some way to one of the earlier things we talked about, which was this is a 7-year project in the middle of a 41-year-old relationship, and that trust is what creates the sense of intimacy and closeness and realization that there are two sides of the camera. And we had a really great time making this book. I just say, for most of the time, we didn't know we were making this book. We were just making beautiful photographs. But we had a really great time. And now we're trying to figure out, is there another project we can do together that, isn't a follow-on or a second, but something totally different. Because it's great to work with. This is going to sound very corny. I don't know what the Italian word for corny is, but to work with someone that you love is a great thing.
I agree.
Sometimes it's hard. We had this rule that we would change who would be in charge because we were actually fighting about who was going to be in charge. So we just said, okay, sometimes you'll be in charge and sometimes I'll be in charge. And that just is an enormous amount of trust, that especially when you're making an artistic project together, that the other person sees the world enough of the way that you do that it can be safe and productive to change roles. It's apparently, this is sort of not related, but apparently now one of the most common ages of people divorcing in the United States are people in their 60s. There's a huge spike. And I just think that's just like so impossible for us to even contemplate. It's not that, my grandmother used to say, well, you sort of merge into one person. We are not one person. Grace has her own likes. There are days that we don't see each other because we have our own projects. We only see each other at dinner, and we might even eat dinner separately because we're working on stuff. But even though we're not one person, we share certain sensibilities that allow us to know what the other person is thinking. And I'll just tell you parenthetically why that's important to me is I'm an identical twin, like the Gambarini brothers. And I've never been alone in my entire life. Never been alone in my entire life. I always have to be with people. It's just a fundamental need. And so, I could only do this project with, well, it would have been a different project if it wasn't Grace, but I I I like to photograph with people. Even if I'm not photographing people, I have for my 8x10 and 5x7 gear, and 8x10 especially is pretty heavy. It's about 30 plus pounds. And so I have a friend who comes with me when I shoot my 8x10. And I really trust him a lot. So he has the no vote. I could say, Eli, is this a photograph? And he could say, like, no, it's not a photograph. And he's usually right. I don't always listen to him, but he's usually right on the no vote. But I do the yes votes. I do, this is a photograph that we're going to take. And in some way that kind of mimics my relationship with Grace, but it's just a way that I like to work. Even when I started with people living on the street, we were making collaborative photographs. I don't know how to make photographs any other way. That's just who I am.
Can you suggest us a specific music to listen while watching this project?
Yeah, the Bach cello suites. I think they cover the emotional intensity and range of the book really well.
Do you learn something specific that can help, while doing this project, that can help other photographers?
Yeah, the answer is you have to be really persistent and never stop. If you have a bad day or you make some bad photographs, it doesn't matter because there's always tomorrow, and tomorrow there'll be better photographs. And you just have to keep plugging away at it. In some sense, it's a job, right? It's a job. And, just like painting frescoes was a job, it doesn't mean you can't achieve something transcendent and sublime. But if you approach it like a job, every day or every Wednesday, I'm going out from, 8 o'clock in the morning till noon, and I'm going to take photographs. That's the way you have to do it. And it doesn't matter whether it's digital or analog. It's just the discipline of the art.
Can you suggest us a book to invite in one of the future episodes?
So I'm going to do what everyone's been doing recently, and I'm going to give you 2 books.
It's okay.
The first book is Morning Bus by Greg Miller, and it's published by L'Artieri Edizioni. It just came out. It's a remarkable book. It's a reflection on childhood in the wake of the Sandy Hook and Uvalde shootings in the United States. These were shootings that took place at school. And it's a series of what seem to be simple environmental portraits of school children waiting for the bus to take them to school. But it's also a meditation on the vulnerability of children and their parents when kids leave for home in a world full of guns and a world full of strange things that happens. So I think it's beautifully shot, it's lovely, and it's scary all at the same time.
I saw it and I agree. It's really beautiful.
The other book I have came out last year, but it's The Crisis Tapes by Charlie Simakaitis. And it came out by TIS Books. And it's an account of his daughter's gradual loss of her sight and her psychological reaction to that diminished reality and how that reverberated through their family. It's a very, very powerful book. It's not always easy to look at it, but not that there's anything graphic in it, but there's hard stuff. And I think it's a really great book.
And then the very, very last question is ask yourself a question and give yourself an answer.
I think the most important question that I'm confronting right now in my life is my next project. And I don't have a full answer. I know it has to do something about absence. So it's the opposite of the Grace project, where Grace is very present. But how do you photograph the absence of a person? I don't know. And it has something to do with urban beaches, which are pretty grim places for less well off people to enjoy the water. There's a lot of concrete, and it's sort of mixing up in my mind. I don't have it all together, but I think about it all the time.
Thanks so much, Scott. It was amazing.
Great. Well, it was really wonderful to do this with you. I mean, I've been listening to all your podcasts, and they're so great. They're so great. I tell all my friends to listen to them.
Thank you.
They're really wonderful. And, you have an amazing range of artists who have so many different things to say, all of which are important. So, yeah.
Yeah, what I suggest to a lot of people is, of course, if they have time, is to watch also episode of maybe project that they don't love so much, because in the end, maybe it's probably in that project that you can learn something new, because maybe it's not close to your approach. And I don't know, I'm learning so much just listening to people like you speaking about, your practice, how you do it, why you do it. I think it's I started this podcast just because I was looking for it from 2-3 years, and I didn't find it, so I said, let's do it. It's true.
Well, this long form of interview, which is not written, right, but live or spoken, is just a great idea to allow artists to talk about their work and to be heard in their own words.
Yeah, especially I think photobooks are not easy object if you are not, let's say, inside this field. And also if you are inside this bubble of photography, it's not easy all the time to take a photo book and to understand it completely. And I'm really, really all the time super curious about which one are the reasons behind some choices, or I don't know. I think it's really fascinating to listen to other photographer approach or experience in life or motivations or practicing. I don't know. I like it, so I'm enjoying it for now.
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. There are definitely after listening to podcasts and buying the book, it definitely changed how I would have seen the book had I not heard the podcast. So, yeah.
But it is what I mainly do also when I go to an exhibition or something. I used to do a first walk without reading anything. Just I go inside and watch the exhibition alone, and then I come back and I read, and then I watch the exhibition again. And it's curious because sometimes you go back and it's amazing, it's incredible, and sometimes maybe you prefer to when you watch it without reading. But it's
exactly
it's like that.
Well, that's why there are no books in this. There are no words in this book.
Yeah.
Nope.
No, not at all. Just the colophon.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks so much, Scott. See you really soon with your next book.
That'll be another 7 years.
It's okay. See you for the book in 7 years, and see you in Bologna when you're going to visit l'Artiera here in my city.
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Ciao to Scott. Ciao, everybody. And see you soon. Bye, Scott.
See you soon. Bye-bye.